As we traveled through the world of Ooh, we meet many characters on our journey. Many who are incredibly obscure and weird, and many who become super relatable and down to earth to us because of how long we've had this connection with them. However, I'd say one of the most down to earth characters isn't even on Earth in the first place. And to me, that's Prismo, the Wishmaster who we meet in the insane finale of Season 4 and the intro to Season 5. This guy, he's chill. You know, Jake even says,
"You're like a strong number 3 on my cool guys list."
But what exactly makes Prismo that approachable and relatable to a lot of people? Well, I think it's simply because he is not this super over-the-top personality, and honestly is very genuine a lot of the time, being very real with our main characters. I wanted to talk about this not just because I think his arc in Fionna and Cake is interesting, but specifically because one of you guys in the comments below, shouts to this person right here, Austin McDowell, pointed out that they wanted to hear me talk about it. Prismo's arc in Fionna and Cake is very interesting because it parallels Simon's arc, Finn's arc, the Lich's arc, and so many other people. Everyone in the show is just depressed as shit now, and I love it. If any of you guys want to hear me talk about specific topics, let me know down below. The fact that any of you guys actually are interested enough in my opinions that you want me to talk about specific things is pretty crazy. If you guys want to help support the channel more, please consider subscribing to the channel. There is a significant portion of you who are not subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoyed this, please consider sticking around. But before I talk about what makes him interesting in Fionna and Cake, I want to give a recap of what I think makes him interesting as a whole, because Prismo isn't like a Simon, where everyone knows immediately who he is. He's kind of a more niche character, even though he's still pretty popular. And I want to talk about what I think makes him interesting, which in my opinion is the idea of him being a sort of watcher over our universe and the many other universes in Ooh and beyond. I think this aspect of him is very interesting because there's no other real character like this, in my opinion. Whenever he shows up, you know it's going to be crazy, but it's never in a dangerous way. It's like he is sort of the setup for something greater that we have no idea what it could be, but it's always going to be awesome. But with him being a sort of watcher, it makes him inherently unattached to anything in our actual storyline, except for Jake. And Jake being his one bond to the actual real world, I think is very telling, especially in Fionna and Cake when Jake is gone and he is like immensely depressed. But I did want to talk about another aspect of Prismo that I think is really interesting. It's the fact that he isn't actually himself at all. And it's not like him putting up some sort of facade. Prismo is a manifestation of a real Prismo, like a real guy. And I think that's a really interesting concept because the real Prismo is constantly asleep, and that's what allows the Wishmaster Prismo, you know, the pink guy on the wall, to appear. And I think that's really interesting because it makes you wonder who the real Prismo actually is and why he has to be asleep for this form to appear. And there's just a lot there that I think is really telling and might even add to the themes that are present in Fionna and Cake. You guys can see it on the thumbnail. I think his theme is escapism. As I said previously, a lot of characters suffer through grief in Fionna and Cake through loss. Finn and Prismo have the same inspiration for their loss, which is the loss of Jake. Finn is coping through connecting with Jake's kids and spending a lot of time with Huntress Wizard and spending time with other people who he thinks needs to be fixed, because if he doesn't have something to work on, then he has nothing, and then he'll start thinking about negative stuff. You guys, you don't need to know about Finn's baggage right now. We're on Prismo. Prismo, as I said, is suffering the exact same way through the loss of Jake. And what he does a lot of the time is he goes to other universes and watches them because they specifically have Jake alive. To me, this is very obviously symbolism of escapism, which is watching media or anything that makes you feel some sort of comfort and then getting that sort of happiness from that rather than thinking about or dwelling on topics that would make you uncomfortable. Escapism isn't necessarily a bad thing because escapism can be super helpful and inspiring for a lot of people. However, it's when you get too far into the escapism rabbit hole that things can really go south. You start to not care about yourself. You start to hyper obsess on specific things, and I think Prismo is definitely an example of this because of the way that his design has changed. He now has some more deep bags on him. He has some unkept facial hair. And I know the unkept facial hair thing might be a subjective thing, but when we realize that Prismo has probably looked like normal clean shaven Prismo for thousands of years, it is pretty telling that only in such little time he's changed so much. And I definitely think Prismo was a victim to this sort of behavior because he literally thought, okay, I'm gonna make a world for myself. I'm gonna do whatever I want, finally do something for me, And the only thing he did, like unconsciously it was, but still, he literally just made a copy of the world his friend Jake lived in. So clearly this dude was just obsessed with Jake. And it goes to show how much he cares for Fionna and Cake. Not just because he is, the creator of this world and he's going to get fired if they get found, but I think there's something more to it. I think he wants to protect them so much because they remind him of his time with Finn and Jake. And I think he wants to treasure that time because, sure, it's not the most creative thing he could have done, but it's something he found comfort in. That's how a lot of escapism is. You find comfort in these things and they become a part of you, essentially. When the Scarab is after Fionna and Cake, Prismo is very desperate, not just to save his job, but to save these people. I think he really does care about people like Fionna and Cake, even though he has created them, because they remind him of the time he had with Finn and Jake. It reminds him of a simpler time, a time he was happier and a time he had a true friend that he cared about. That's why when we see him at the start of episode 4, he's constantly flickering through other universes that have Jake and saying how happy he is and how this universe has his favorite guy and stuff like that. He clearly misses his friend very dearly, and I think this is a way of him coping with the loss of Jake. And I think it's very telling that when the Scarab goes after them constantly, Prismo is completely unhelpful, and he willingly sacrifices himself in order to save Fionna and Cake. Not by dying, but literally holding back another person who could easily rat him out to their boss. Lastly, I did want to talk about Prismo's connection to the Scarab and the long-lasting effects Prismo has had seemingly from the finale. Prismo at the end of the series has some sort of like glitchiness going on. We see it with his face inverting, him like glitching out with his arm, and a bunch of stuff like that. And although we don't entirely know what that means, I think that is just a very obvious sign that Prismo is not the Prismo he was before. He has changed by going through this journey. No longer is he the super chill Prismo we always heard so much about. He's now, gone through some stuff, and he has made some sacrifices in order to ensure that Fionna and Cake's world is alive. And I think it's very interesting that when Scarab is forced to basically work with Prismo, instead of berating the Scarab and making him, the butt of the joke, he actually welcomes the Scarab into the things he finds comfort in. So instead of it being escapism as a way for solitude, they're using escapism as a way to build a community. And personally, I find that really, really powerful because escapism can be used not to just get rid of your own life or do whatever. It's a way to build bonds with people. And Prismo and the Scarab isn't even the only example of this. I think a much more prominent example is through the character of Astrid. I think this scene with her and Fionna come together through their shared quote-unquote fandom of the Fionna and Cake series is really cool because it goes to show how people can so easily get to know each other and form bonds with each other over something that's seemingly so insignificant. And I also think it's really great that Astrid constantly tries to big up Fionna and make her feel like she's the greatest thing ever in a world that she's completely unaccustomed to. It's really, really cool, and I think is a great way to get her adjusted to the world so effortlessly. I think it's very cool that the show itself embraces the importance of fandoms, communities, and all that type of stuff. And obviously, I don't think Scarab's gonna write the hottest fan fiction in the world for his universe, but hey, it's a start, and it's getting him interested in the things Prismo's interested in, and I think they're gonna have a pretty cool relationship without him being a bum, through a lot of the series. All this stuff back here on my shelf. Wow. I really care about this stuff here, but the thing that really makes it important to me is the people I've met through this stuff. It's nice to see that the Scarab is more than he was before through this bond with Prismo through their shared interests. And with that, that'll be it from me. Take care, and have a good one.